Hello, everyone. Good afternoon. Thank you for joining us for the second annual Black in Immunology Week, a week where we will be celebrating, amplifying, and supporting Black voices in immunology. Before we begin, we would like to thank our major sponsors, Immune Deficiency Foundation and Imperial College London. Please don't forget to tweet about our session today using hashtag #CareersInImmuno, with each word capitalized for accessibility purposes. We will have live captions and ACL interpreters during the sessions, and you can submit questions through the comment function on the platform, not the Q&A. As a reminder, we will require that all audience members be polite and respectful while in the Black and Immuno space, and if we see anything offensive, your comment will be deleted immediately and be banned from the platform. After the conclusion of the week, recorded videos will be posted on our YouTube channel, and transcripts will be made available on the website blackandimmuno.org. My name is Kristen Carter. I'm a postdoc at Yale, and I will be moderating the session today. So today we welcome you to the session, Careers in Immunology panel, a panel discussion highlighting the breadth of possible careers in immunology beyond academia. And today we have three great panelists today that will be talking to you about their careers. We'll first start off with Dr. Danielle Chum. She's from Ghana, West Africa. Dr. Chum received her BA in biology from Vassar College, where she studied the effects of climate change on coral bleaching. Danielle received her PhD in cancer immunology from the University of Buffalo, where she studied the immunology of breast cancer metastasis. Dr. Chum is an AAAS If Then ambassador, an initiative aimed at increasing the visibility of women in STEM as role models for young girls. If she's not reading romantic novels, you'll find Dr. Chum enjoying Indian and Korean food, pretending to be Beyonce's background dancer, or getting lost in the wormhole that is BBC Earth YouTube channel. Welcome, Dr. Chum. Next, we will have Ashton Trotman-Grant, or Ash. Ash is a PhD candidate in the Department of Immunology at the University of Toronto. He studies T-cell development, synthetic biology, and thymic regeneration in the lab of Dr. Juan Carlos Zuniga-Flacker. With an interest in entrepreneurship, he recently co-founded a startup with his supervisor and collaborating scientists called Notch Therapeutics, where they aim to develop off-the-shelf engineered T-cells for different diseases. Beyond the lab, he is a proponent of science communication, entrepreneurship, and youth mentorship. Welcome, Ash. And finally, we have Dr. Jonathan Wosen. He is a San Diego Union Tribune's biotech reporter. He also covers the San Diego Zoo. And before joining the San Diego Union Tribune in April 2020, Jonathan was a student in the UC Santa Cruz Science Communication Program. He holds a doctorate in immunology from Stanford and has interned at STAT News, the Santa Cruz Sentinel, and Knowledgeable Magazine. Welcome, Dr. Wilson. So I think we'll start today with everyone just going around the room and describing their current job or position and perhaps what a day in the life looks like. Whoever wants to start.
Okay, I can start. Hi, everybody. I'm currently still a PhD student. I'm in the process of writing my thesis, about 2 more months left, I hope, to actually write that. So most of the days is just sitting on my computer at this point, just writing my thesis and going through that process. And I'm sure everyone on this panel already knows. In parallel to that, I also work with a VC firm to try to understand how they approach investing and building companies. And I mentioned, as Christina alluded to before, I had a previous experience building another company. So I work in some capacity helping that company as well.
Thank you, Ash.
I can go next. I'm currently a business development manager for Geno Skin. And what my company does is we repurpose skin from tummy tucks and we turn them into live skin models for testing. So the skin models are such a way that you can inject them. So you can look at injection site reactions and the mast cells that are involved. Shout out to mast cells. They suck. And I know.
Starting the violence early today.
I'm so sorry. I can't help myself. But they cause you pain at the injection where you get injected. I know that's what they're supposed to do. Whatever.
We gotta stay on track. No violence today.
No violence. But yeah, so the skin models are in such a way that you can inject them. You can put topical treatments on them. You can put them. They sit in a culture media, so you can put whatever test article you're looking at into them and they can absorb them. So you can do a systemic kind of treatment. And so we work with a breadth of pharmaceutical companies and also cosmeceutical companies. And what I do is I find people that are, I find companies that might be doing a study that would require human testing, but not necessarily on humans, because nobody's going to allow you to put cream on their body and then punch their skin and take it out. No one is going to be Swiss cheese for you. It's not going to happen. So what we provide is we provide this bridge between, preclinical testing in mice and actual clinical testing in humans, where we create like first in human data. A day in my life is basically calming CEOs down whenever I send them a quote for a study so they don't freak out. And so it involves a lot of, it involves a lot of people skills. You have to know how to talk to people. And you also have to, what I do is whenever anyone approaches us with regards to a question they have that they think our models can answer, I'm basically the gatekeeper of, hey, this is feasible with our models, or this is not feasible yet, but maybe we could develop it, or that's not the direction we're going into right now, before we move on to where I bring in my study director, who's like the smartest person I've ever met. And then we talk the science through with the client. So that's what I do. It's what my life looks like.
Fantastic. Thank you for sharing.
Well, I guess that leaves me. So
yes,
my work is pretty different because I'm not in the lab. I'm a journalist. I got my PhD studying antigen presentation and working with sort of small intestinal organoids. But these days, I'm talking to scientists. I'm talking to biotech CEOs. I'm talking to people in the on the venture side of the life science industry. So I'm still thinking about science, still reading studies and writing and talking about science, but doing it from the perspective of getting that information out there to the general public in ways that are clear and interesting and relevant, which I think we all know, coming from the research world, that there's a certain nomenclature and acronyms and Greek symbols, and there's just a ton of stuff that doesn't really translate well and doesn't capture why we do science and why we're excited about it. So I'm always sort of trying to prod scientists into speaking in everyday relatable terms about why they're excited about their work and how they think it plays a part in helping us diagnose diseases, treat them. So every day is a little different. I live in a world where I have deadlines all the time because we're a daily newspaper. So sometimes we're it's kind of crazy because in graduate school you spend years working on a project to get it to a point where your thesis committee and your advisor will sort of let you go out into the world. But oftentimes I may write a story in a day or in a couple days, or a couple stories in a day. It really just depends on what the information we're trying to get out there. But you get used to that after a while. And I'm on the phone a lot. I'm working from home, but making a lot of phone calls to researchers and texting people and emailing people and trying to get data from public health departments and that sort of thing. So it's a lot of conversations with really smart, influential people, and that's one of the nice things about journalism. You sort of get access to all these movers and shakers, quote unquote, and you get to just ask them really direct questions on behalf of the general public. So it keeps things interesting every day.
Yeah, that's great. No, it's good to remind us that communication is key when going between the general public and scientists. Would you say that's like your favorite part of your job, is being that sort of relay station between the general public and the science community?
Yeah, I think that's, one of my favorite parts for sure. I mean, part of what we're doing too is not just sort of relaying the message, so to speak, but we're also trying to take a critical look at what's happening in science, good, bad, or otherwise. Whether there's a lot of early stage research, for example, that we have to look at and determine whether it's far enough along to really put that in print and have thousands of people read it. Not that there's anything bad about that paper or that project, but it's one of the things we think about is stuff is, there are a whole lot of, we've gotten pretty good at, giving mice cancer and then curing it. So you have to think carefully about, covering that in a study for the general, or a story for the general public. I just personally just get a lot of fun out of meeting and talking with people. You know, I'm an introvert, but when I'm having an interview with somebody that's sort of focused around a particular topic, that's super fun, and you get to talk to all these, people. So, 2017, before like Anthony Fauci was sort of a household name, I interviewed him when I was at Stat News in Boston for a story on HIV
Casual.
vaccine work.
That's wonderful.
Janet Woodcock, who, up until recently was running the FDA as acting commissioner, interviewed her for a story on drug manufacturing. So you get to talk to former mayors, and I think that's the fun part for me. It's the interviewing, and then, writing can be its own challenge because you got to stare at an empty Word document and figure out how to structure something, which comes with time and practice. But I think it's the people I get to meet and the fact that I get to constantly be exposed to new ideas. And even as a PhD in immunology, it's like I might know a lot about immunology, but frankly, it's a small sliver of things where I'm an expert, and everything else is, I'm coming in with a little bit more of a knowledge base, but, I feel like I get to continuously be exploring different, aspects of like life science and like science in general. So those are things I like.
Thank you. And over to you, Ash and Dr. Chum. What are your favorite parts of what you do, your careers?
I want to hear what Ash is going to say.
Yeah, Ash is going to choose violence. I was hoping you'd go first.
Absolutely not.
I want to know what Ash is going to say.
Ash is ready.
No. Part of my favorite part of my day, I would say. So I guess before my interest is in entrepreneurship and building companies of value, my thing that excites me all the time is the ideation part, collaborating with other people that are like-minded, sitting in a room with engineers and clinicians and coming up with solutions to big, grand ideas. That's very exciting to me, actually, because for me, as Jonathan kind of alluded to, you're an expert in what you know. Half a decade I spent learning about human T cell development, which is fantastic. I love it. But being exposed to everything else out there in science and medicine and seeing what other people are working on, that gets me up in the morning. That gets me very excited about finding out a solution to that kind of random outside problems in the world. That's what's exciting to me. And also, like, if you are creative, if you like building things of value in the world, that's very exciting to kind of just figure out with other people, with other engineers, how you can do that and what problems you want to solve. So all that is very, very exciting to me. Why do you think I would choose violence?
Well, we had a chat earlier, so I wasn't sure how the panel was going to go today.
No.
Dr. Chum? Yeah. So just like the other two panelists, I think I have undiagnosed ADD. So the thing is, I went into immunology because I was curious about immunology. I didn't intend to get a PhD. It was an accident. And since then, I've tried to learn as much as I can about everything, because there is so much. There is just so much. And everything that's happening is really cool. Sometimes you look at some things and you're like, whoa, what are you doing? But it's still really cool. And my job allows me to let my ADD flourish, because I don't just work in immunology. I work with people who are looking at the most random things. They're looking at medical devices that are like super tiny. You're looking at different formulations for sunscreen, and you're looking at different injectables. And there's just, people got microbiome, and I'm like, oh, in the skin, that makes sense. And so I have this influx every day of the most random thing I could never even think of, just shows up in my inbox. And I'm like, you can do that. Oh yeah, let's try it. So I think this job was perfect for me because it gives me a chance to dip my toes in as many pies as possible and have my pies. So I actually do have my cake and I can eat it. So that is what I love about my job. I hope my boss doesn't see this.
That's funny. Well, do you think your employer supports your like self-diagnosed ADD? Like, is it Is he like, "Well, stay focused on one or two things," or it's like, "Well, do more, do more, do more"?
He's worse, so it's great.
Oh, okay. That's positive.
I remember when I was interviewing for the job, he straight up called me out on my IG posts, and I was like, "Oh, you found me there."
You're supposed to change your name before you go job searching. Oh my God.
I'm gonna show up as me. I can't. As my therapist said, why are you trying to box your star? You shouldn't box a star. A star is meant to shine. So this is it. I'm not saying I'm a star yet, but I'm saying that you can't hide who you are. It's gonna come out. You're gonna be in a meeting, you're gonna forget your camera's on, someone's gonna say something funky, and then you're gonna make a face. And then you're gonna know who you are. So yeah, it's I really do love the possibilities of the product we have at our company, and how what's really cool is how different scientists are using it to answer the most varied questions. And I think it's exciting to see human innovation like that. And also I get to take part in it. And I think it's every little girl's dream to have, access to this kind of trove of knowledge. So, yeah.
That's great. Thank you. And Ash, so in your synopsis, you said that you're interested in communication, entrepreneurship, and mentorship, and you're also juggling, finishing your PhD. Do you find that your supervisor is pretty supportive of all of your irons in the fire?
I think so. Well, I mean, yes.
You hope so at this point, right?
Yeah, for the most part, yes. But as anyone can relate to, a graduate student, you try to focus on your actual research project. That's your priority as a graduate student. But for me, similar to Danielle, I have a varied interest in everything. So it takes a type of supervisor to allow for that to kind of flourish. You need that flexibility in the lab to allow me to try this, try that, but also still try to focus on my project. So it took a little work to get to that point, but we have an understanding like what my interest is, what value I can bring to the lab, and what I want to do for my life. I think a lot of people in grad school, they take so long to think to the very end to figure out what it exactly is they want to do after. I think that's a mistake. I had the early advantage to kind of know what I want to do when I started grad school. So I spent the early days kind of like collaborating with engineers or joining this community or checking out so many different YouTube videos about trying to figure out what exactly I want to work on. A lot of resources available to me that I really leveraged to figure out what I want to work on. And because of that, I did a lot of different things in my grad school, which I don't regret, which I very much appreciate. But as a student, you have to have that transparency, understanding with the supervisor to be able to do that kind of stuff, to be comfortable in that position, to explore this. So now we're at the same page, but I can tell you where I'm sure there's some hiccups that we both experienced. But right now we're on the same page about what it is I want to do and the things that I like to do in parallel at the same time.
And Dr. Wosen, you started with graduate school and your doctorate in immunology, and then moved to reporting. Did you find your supervisor was like, "What are you doing?" Or were they quite supportive of this transition?
Yeah, my supervisor was she was very supportive. I think Dr. Chum, if I'm saying that your name correctly, you mentioned going into graduate school, sort of because you were curious, not necessarily because you had some, particular endpoint you were trying to get to. Yeah, I think for me, I was pretty similar. I mean, I really liked learning about the immune system and sort of followed that into graduate school. And I kind of figured that, well, maybe I'd stay in academia, keep doing research, have a lab, that kind of thing. Just because I didn't know any different or any really what else you could do with that interest, with that kind of passion. So a couple of years in the graduate school, I noticed that I was really good at presenting, really good at writing like lay abstracts, and anytime you had to give a lab meeting or journal club, like I was always really good in those settings. But what I didn't like was being at the bench and doing experiments and troubleshooting and then troubleshooting again, which probably I don't know if anybody's really that thrilled about. But so I had certain skills and then other things where I felt like I wasn't as strong or wasn't as interested. It took me a while to put together that maybe I didn't want to be in research long term. And then that was maybe a couple of years into my PhD. I always had this weird sense that, not too weird, but I had like this feeling that, if I hadn't gotten into science, I would have been a journalist, like, because I did journalism in high school. But by the time I was an undergrad, I was already a bio major, and sort of, I felt like that was my identity and wanted to pursue that or stick to that script, which I'd written for myself. So I was still figuring that out, but I started to meet a couple science writers on campus, and they happened to be putting together this like 2-week mini course where they brought in speakers. They talked about what you could do in science writing, how different people made that transition, what the day-to-day work was like, and it sort of made sense. It clicked, and it felt like, oh, I can actually do both. I can keep my interest in science, but I can also do journalism, and that felt right. So I started looking for, kind of like Ash mentioned, in terms of trying to look for opportunities while you're in grad school and using the resources around you. I started doing like little podcasts with other grad students, science podcasts. I took just a class at Stanford that was, I think, mostly an undergrad class, but it was sort of an intro to news writing, because I could do that. Did a summer, spent the summer doing an internship, actually through this AAAS program called the Mass Media Fellows Program, that puts graduate students and postdocs who would like to know what it feels like to be in a newsroom. They just basically drop you in a newsroom, whether that's NPR or like Smithsonian or Philadelphia Inquirer or the LA Times or any of these places. In my case, it was Stat News. So yeah, my advisor was comfortable with me doing that, up to a certain point. So after I came back from that summer experience, that she was pretty clear that she wanted me to really focus in on wrapping up the project and not necessarily doing like a million other things, which I thought was fair at that point. But so I think the main challenge was for me to figure out what I wanted to do, and I was really lucky to have somebody who was understanding enough to support that within some kind of reasonable constraints.
Yeah, no, mentors are very important when trying to figure out, where you want to go and supporting you on that journey. So how would you guys recommend, I guess, shopping for a mentor? I know typically, like PhD students, at least for me anyway, I assume my supervisor would be that, but I found I needed more support and he was way too busy. So I had to look, outside of my program for people that I connected with on a personal level. How did you guys go about finding mentors during your training or during your careers?
I can start. So one of my longest serving mentors is my undergrad supervisor. Strangely enough, we are still friends. We still talk, I think 2 hours every month. Well, yeah, we get on the phone. We're like, hey, we're going to have a 30-minute conversation. And then 2 hours later, my phone is hot. I'm like, Jody, we got to go. Because Jody, Professor Jody Schwartz, it took her forever to break me into calling her Jody, because I'm Ghanaian. I don't call adults by their first name.
No.
I still feel like my mom is about to show up out of nowhere and be like, who are you calling by their first name? But Jody was the one who derailed my life. And I tell her this every day. And I used to write, message her in grad school and say, I'm struggling. It's your fault. Because Jody knew I wanted to become a medical doctor when she met me.
Mm-hmm.
But she was like, oh, just do research in my lab for the summer and check out these cute anemones. And it's going to be fine. It's going to look great on your med school application. She knew what she was doing. Because anemones are dumb cute. And coral bleaching is a very important question. I mean, we were seeing it happen in the Great Barrier Reef. So Jody, I think one thing I loved about Jody was how very honest she was about what research entailed. She told me when I did research in her lab for the summer, and I was like, I'm going to get a PhD. And she was like, no, pause. You like research in my lab. You don't like research. So your junior year summer, go somewhere else. go to another lab. Is there something you've always been curious about? I was like, yeah, cancer. Unfortunately, I'm one of the people, like many, who has had a family member taken by cancer. So I was like, yeah, I'm interested in cancer. She's like, go work in another lab where you don't know anybody. See how you feel, and then come back. And that was the thing that has stuck, it stuck, it stood out to me my whole life is, if you're looking for a mentor, you have to find someone who can see into your future. They have to see what you would look like in 10 years and then take that potential and pour it into you. Because if you find somebody who doesn't see your future, then I don't think they can push you hard enough. And to this day, I still don't know what Jody saw, but she must have seen something. And she was like, yeah, go ahead and do this. And we're still in touch. I mean, every time I switch jobs, she knows somehow and calls me. She's like, let's talk about this. What's going on? And that to me is what a true mentor is someone who can see into your future and then turn it into energy and just keep pouring it into you, encouraging you through it all. So yeah, if you're looking for a mentor, find someone who has the sight. Yes.
Fantastic. Thank you.
Oh, I guess I'll add. I mean, everything you just said is wonderful. Another thing along those lines, when you're looking for mentors, you want someone who cares about you as a person, not just in terms of what you can do, for them. So if we're talking in the context of graduate school, you want someone who doesn't just see you as a data generating machine or experiment generating machine, but they've actually got some interest in you and your future, and yeah, like you just said, and sort of they can maybe even see your future in ways that you can't because you don't necessarily know what's possible for yourself. So I know when I was figuring out what lab I was going to be in and who'd be my PhD advisor, it was kind of an unusual situation. I had committed to joining this particular lab, this other lab, and then there was an issue because they had to have a big paper retracted, and so I was, unsure if that was really a smart decision at that point to stay with them. But the postdoc I had been working with during my rotation said, "Oh, you should talk to, Betsy Mellons. She advises a lot of the postdocs, and she has a lot of good advice, probably for grad students too. So why don't you just check in with her and get her thoughts?" So I happened to be in the area by her office and just knocked on the door and basically walked in unannounced and said, "Hey, I'm a first-year graduate student in the immunology program, and I need to talk to you about the situation right now." She had been collaborating with the lab that had this like paper retraction issue, so she knew the situation. But I just spelled it out to her. I don't really know what to do right now. Can you give me any kind of advice? And no, I mean, she was awesome. She asked me about who I was and what I was interested in. She suggested other labs I might want to talk with. She also said, I think my lab would be a great fit for you, but I'm also going to give you some other things.
Just put that in there.
But actually, no, I think, and obviously I ended up joining her lab, which I think was the best possible choice. But yeah, so when people care about you just as a person, not based on what you can deliver for them, that's a good mentor. And you can directly ask people if they'd be comfortable mentoring you. You can explicitly ask for mentorship, which might sound like a weird thing, but when you're thinking about applying for jobs and you're coming in as a relatively new person, you do want to think about, well, who's going to look out for you, who's going to sort of help guide you to that next step. And sometimes it happens organically, and other times, it's worth asking people up front if they're open, giving you some advice and guiding you, and they'll tell you.
Yeah, self-advocacy is huge. Oh, were you gonna say something, Ash?
No, I was just gonna say I love that, both of their stories. I really appreciate that. For myself, I found a mentor in, I guess, different parts of my life. Earlier on in my life, before I even started undergrad, I had a mentor. I have a twin brother who's at Stanford right now, Immunology. I had a mentor, it goes by the name of Mr. and Mrs. Lendor. And they taught my brother and I just the value of education, the simple math, sciences, how to be a good person. And they, at this point, unfortunately, Mrs. Lendor has died now. But Mrs. Lendor, at this point in our life, still continues to preach and educate us, the value of being a good person, always available whenever we want to ask for advice. And that's been a core mentor to me since I was a kid, and I appreciate that. As I got older, when I got to grad school, I would say the mentor has been a professor that I met in undergrad, actually, here in Toronto. And she taught me how to hold a pipette. She taught me how to approach science, I think, a hypothesis. She's my first scientific mentor. I love her to this day. Actually, funny story, she was my professor in undergrad. When I got to grad school, I joined another lab adjacent to her. Her name is Michelle Anderson. I joined another lab adjacent to her, and so we still kept in contact. She was on my committee at the early parts of my PhD. She was still that kind of continuity for me throughout my whole graduate career, which is fantastic. Early on in my graduate career, I mentioned before that I had the opportunity to spin off a technology into a company, and through that process, if anyone's involved in entrepreneurship, they know there's so many nuances that you just don't expose to at all. I had no idea about equity, financing, IP. I didn't know any of that kind of stuff. I watched YouTube videos, I read a lot of books. I didn't get any of that kind of stuff. But when we spun off a company, we had a director, a young guy named Timothy Key. I asked him, similar to Dr. Wosen mentioned, I actually made the intention to ask him, would you be my mentorship? Very awkward for me to do that, but it was very valuable for me to do that. So I mentioned to him, hey, would you like to be my mentor? He said yes. And that was like 4 years ago now. And he teaches me everything that I need to know about the business side of science. He's so personable. I think that's so important. Like if someone actively engage in your growth and your success, it takes an interest in not just what you can provide, really who you are as a person, that's very valuable for a mentorship. And I found that in those three people. And I think they taught me how to be a mentor as well. So I had the opportunity to be a mentor to young students that I met when they were in high school, now in undergrad. And that gives me so much joy to show off my knowledge or inspire them or give them opportunities like people gave me. So I love that. Being a mentor and being a mentee, it's a fantastic kind of a personal growth for anybody. And I think it's such an important part. And I know it's very difficult to get to that point, but even if, like in entrepreneurship, if you don't see yourself in companies and all that kind of stuff, reach out to the social media, reach out on Twitter to anybody that looks like you and is interested in your doing. I'm sure there's so many resources and people available that will just share their time and expertise towards you. You can find vendors out there for sure.
Yeah, fantastic. Something all three of you touched on is the element of self-advocacy and being bold enough to say, hey, I'm looking for a mentor. Are you available to provide, guidance? So what would you say to someone who's maybe a bit shyer or not as comfortable up front about, needing something from someone? What would you suggest to them?
I would say that if you're shy, your best bet is an email. You can start with an email or a LinkedIn message, because and this is tough, but you're going to have to jump. This is one of those things where you can't experience the water from the top. You have to jump, and it's not fun. It's not fun at all. I'm not saying, oh, you just get up and you craft a cool email and then they respond. You've got to want it. So if you want it, you're going to have to ask. And whoever your mentor is will understand that you're shy and they will make accommodations for it. That's how you know that they want you to succeed. They will make accommodations, and they will probably also push you to be able to find ways around how shy you are and be able to, get stuff done while still staying true to yourself. So yeah, you have to jump. That's just it. It's not fun, but you got to jump. It's fun in the water.
Leap of faith.
You got to leap.
Ash or Jonathan, would you guys like to add to that? Or I guess, do you think this applies in industry as well? So looking for a mentor, is it the same thing as sending an email, knocking on someone's door? Or is it different? Is that an academia thing?
No, I wouldn't say it's an academia thing. I would say it's a similar approach to finding mentorship in industry as well, though. You gotta take that first step to just send the email out or tweet at them or talk to someone else in your network that can provide a connection to that person. But I would also say, at least the problem that I had that kind of the beginning hindered me is perhaps a lack of confidence in terms of the imposter syndrome is real, and that a lack of confidence in knowing your abilities when you're approaching someone. I would just say to don't worry about failure, don't be embarrassed, don't be ashamed, just send that email out, contact that person. And if they say no, which a lot of people will say no because of a lack of time or lack of interest, that's okay. I promise you that's okay. There's other people that would be willing to help you out. So just take that plunge.
Yeah, no, I think that's all that translates across pretty much everything in life. So I won't piggyback too much. I'll just say that I think that really puts that's exactly the case in journalism, in industry, in academia. I mean, it's interesting, like about a year ago, I got a LinkedIn message from a high school student in the Bay Area who was putting together this blog or a website with information on coronavirus, so treatments, tests, vaccines. And she reached out to me and said, hey, Dr. Wosen, I'm trying to create this website. Would you mind taking a look at our articles and giving some feedback? And I did. I was happy to do that. So you'd be surprised. There are people out there who are willing to help you. And there's really no harm in asking, because the worst they can do is not respond or say no. And they were not already a mentor to begin with. So that kind of leaves you in the same position. Except now maybe you're a little more comfortable asking the next person. So there's no, the only way to lose is not to try, I think.
Elegantly put. So to those of you that have left academia, how did you feel, your decision to leave? Was that supported? Was it a bit tense, a bit awkward? In other words, always this industry versus academia kind of way of thinking. How were your experiences?
So I think I was in my fourth year when I knew that, okay, this academia thing is it's not my cup of hot chocolate. It's just not. So I sat down and talked to my boss. And was he happy? No, but he knew, because at that point I had given a TEDx Buffalo talk, and that was just that was, if there was this bigger signal I could have given, I mean, it couldn't have gone any bigger. Well, a TED talk maybe, and so he understood that, but he still said, keep your options for a postdoc open, because of course, if you do a postdoc, it does add to your value when it comes to job searches and stuff like that. So I think we reached that point in my fourth year. So the whole point basically was to finish the project, get a great amount of data, publish in a good paper, and then, leave enough that another grad student could come and pick up a project and still have questions to answer. Was I terrified? Yeah. And super jealous of all the other grad students who were going to do postdocs. So I felt like you have a map. And I felt like I had, once I graduated, I was at a cliff and there's water, hence the jump analogy I used, because that's how I felt. I was like, I don't know. I knew of one person who is also one of my mentors. I saw a question about having a mentor in industry. He actually told his PI that he would quit his PhD. He walked to the stage for his master's, and he said he doesn't know what happened, but he blanked out and he found himself back in the lab after his master's graduation. And that's when he knew that at his heart, he wanted to finish his PhD. What does he do now? He is a director of business development. So, he was the one who's like, finish out the PhD. And then, he gave me that analogy. The PhD is like a master key. You have a PhD shows that you have the ability to learn. So you can plop you in any situation and you can take the available knowledge and synthesize it into something that's useful. So yeah, my grad school PI, he accepted it. And, I jumped and it's been quite a swim.
You're being modest. You're doing so well.
Chill.
Yeah, I think, it's interesting you put it in those terms, because I feel like mentors can sometimes tell that it's coming before you actually tell them. So I think my advisor, sort of knew that I wasn't all that happy in the research world, and that I was looking to do other things. So, by the time I was explicitly talking about that, I think, it made sense. In my case, I was also wondering about, should I actually finish grad school? Should I just, jump ship and go straight into science writing? It ended up being that we were able to come up with a plan to wrap up the project that made sense, and I was able to get a little more help and a little more support from other people in the lab than I had been getting up until then. So that, and also experiments just started working, which was nice. So that, things aligned in that way. But I think people probably saw it coming sooner than I realized they did. And personally, I haven't really looked back, in my own life. I don't find myself missing being in academia. There is something cool about science where you can, read a paper, have an idea, and then run into the lab and design an experiment. So that aspect, you can't really recreate. But apart from that, it's been a good shift for me.
So I would say I'm still in academia, technically.
You can still speak on it.
But I kind of knew in second year. So I entered grad school with the thought that I always like business, but I always thought like I'd do a postdoc after a PhD. I like the idea of professorship. It's like I like the idea of giving lectures on cool topics. I thought that was pretty interesting, mentoring young kids. I thought that was pretty cool. But then second year, when in grad school you have that time where what we call reclass, from 2 years, and then you reclass into your permanent PhD program. People call it qualifying exams, whatever it may be, but in Toronto we call it reclass. And at that point, I was going to pursue a PhD in the States, I thought, with my brother. But I was exposed to, your technology that you're creating, we can leverage that into a clinical trial. So, okay, that's very interesting. I stayed for a little longer, pursued my whole PhD there. But then through that whole process, I exposed to companies and industry, and realized that the things that I want to do in this world, the things that I want to create value, I think the better medium to do that for me personally was through a company rather than through an academic position. And that was a bit of a struggle. I had to talk to a lot of different people to figure that out. But I tried little different things that failed, like little venture opportunities that failed. I tried different accelerators, which is just like an incubator that gives you resources to how to build a company. I learned how to create things through that. And then I kind of fell in love with that whole process of the creativity, the high growth, high speed, the baseline stressful all the time life you're having. All that's kind of exciting for me. And the things you can do with when you kind of collaborate and mobilize a lot of people and capital to approach a problem in the world, that was very interesting to me. And that was beyond at least what I would do in a traditional postdoc position or a traditional academic position. So I spoke to people that were in that kind of field, and they kind of advised me, maybe you should go this route. It's still science, you still have autonomy over your project, but you can also lead people and create profits and develop and maybe perhaps a lucrative upside of it. So I thought, that's a better path for me for more impact and more of a autonomy over a career that I was trying to design. So I think, long story short, I think earlier on in the PhD, I kind of realized that, but through mentorships and through people kind of advising me what to do, I kind of, at the end of my PhD now, I kind of know exactly that academic life is not necessarily for me, but I still want to be close to the science in some capacity. but do a bit more business focused career.
When I grow up, I want to be like Ashton.
What? No.
Out there.
No.
Just saying.
Truly a role model for all of us.
I'm about to DM you.
I would say that I'm still learning. I'm still growing. We're still trying to figure out exactly the life we want to design as a career, that kind of stuff. But
you've got it together. I mean,
no, I wouldn't say that.
I don't know why
wow, like
this
could you
is
hire
gonna
me?
make it.
I appreciate that, guys. You guys are awesome. Still working on it.
Well, that's fantastic. You all have different experiences with mentorship, and then now as you're moving on in your careers, giving back and inspiring the next generation of free thinkers and scientists. So, to those who are interested in maybe a career in immunology, what do you think the best ways to expose mentees or trainees to different careers in immunology?
Wait, I'm not sure I understand the question.
Oh, sure. So what are the best ways to expose your mentees or people who are being trained with you to the different career paths in immunology? Mm-hmm. So I know, Dr. Wosen, you said you experienced the writing group and you enjoyed, writing and presenting, and that was great. And Dr. Chum, you said you had given the TED Talk and, you have a bit of ADD, so you were really out there. And then Ashton, you mentioned that you had experience with entrepreneurship and you were sold. So what would you say to those trying to figure out, what their path is?
So I would say, look at the alumni of your department and what they have done. Because that is, if you're looking at degrees of separation, that is one of the closest connections you could have, is somebody who has gone through what you are going through, and then ask them, how they got to where they have. The only way I think you can get exposed to anything is if you look for something that you think you might be interested in. So I say start with your alumni, because quickest, you probably will get a response from them, as opposed to some person on Twitter who has like a huge following and you might send them a DM. That might also work, but you have to ask questions. You have to find people who have done things that you think you might be interested in, and then talk to them. Ask them if you could shadow them. It's kind of hard. For me, you can't shadow me because I have NDAs surrounding everything I do. So I honestly can't invite you to a meeting, but I can tell you what I do every day. I can take you through my thought process. I can tell you that sometimes I slam my computer closed and jump on my bed and scream in frustration, but then I come back after I eat ice cream and get it going. I can tell you the realities of the day-to-day, and tell you how I interviewed, how I, put together my resume, those kinds of very practical, pieces of information. But if you don't find people who are doing something you might be interested in, you will not get all this insider knowledge. And you can read as much as you can about something, but unless you talk to somebody who's experiencing it, there is no way you can know the realities of the day-to-day. So I hope that answers the question for me.
Yes, no, it was great. Thank you. Exposure is key, really.
Maybe one small tip in the beginning, you may not really know where the opportunities are, but sometimes just talking to people about what you're interested in or what you're trying to get more exposure to can really help, because your friends, your classmates, people that maybe they don't know about that opportunity, but maybe they know someone who does. So frankly, just going around, saying, hey, I've been thinking about getting more exposure to entrepreneurship and starting a company, or sort of curious about this particular line of research or science communication or science policy. Just going around talking about those things when you're together with people, I think that can be surprisingly helpful. And then my other piece of advice would be, don't worry in the beginning about finding, opportunities that seem really big or official or quote unquote important. Just start at whatever level is accessible to you. So when I was trying to get more science writing experience, there was a group that was doing a little blog that I don't think was getting millions of people to look at it, but it was a blog. It was something I could give a shot at, and and the same thing with the podcast and with other things I was trying to do. And you do that for long enough, and then when you talk to people at a level that's more professional, you now have like a list of things you can point to and say, I've done this, I've done that. I know it's not necessarily at the level of professional organization, but I've explored the opportunities around me, and then that gets you to that next step, and you go from there. So just talk a lot about what you're into, what you think you're into, and also just look for the closest level to you, and whether that's through talking to alums or things that are going on campus. Those are perfectly fine ways to start.
Yeah, I agree with all your points. I would say from my perspective, I love this question a lot because the way I see it, when I was in grad school, the way I exposed young people into immunology and entrepreneurship was by giving talks in the community as much as you can. So in high school, in undergrad, and when I was in grad school, I went to a lot of high schools to give talks about stem cells, about how you can make any kind of organ and tissue in the body with it, immunology, how it interfaces with all our organs, and I was like very much the best discipline to learn about biochemistry, physics, and chemistry. It's amazing for that. And you can see the excitement in some of these kids because they had, at least in high school, you all learn like basic biology. They had no concept of what immunology immune system is. So exposing to that at a young age about how cool science can be and how you can leverage that in developing medicines, I think that's huge, especially young kids nowadays where everything is about software and programming computers. I talked about like the analogy of programming cells, like you program a computer to target cancer, and they got very excited about that. I'd also say to young people to just try things and fail. That helped me a lot, where you can come up with any kind of project with your friends, or if you're a programmer, you come up with any app you want to do. It may not work, but that process of creating something, failing, succeeding, whatever it is, it's so invaluable. And I would implore anyone to just try things. I'll also say for young people to join communities. Nowadays, you have Discord, you have different chat rooms you can learn about with like-minded people to discover and figure out what's happening in the world. And that's really cool. Once you get to the undergrad stage, you have, in Toronto at least, you have communities like Bio Dojo, which is like an undergrad focused community that exposes young people to biotechnology and entrepreneurship. You have, at least for me, when I went to the University of Toronto for graduate school, you have something called Medicine by Design, which is a community where they expose you, provide you resources to engineer cells or entrepreneurship or translation. I think that's a fantastic community to join. So I think there's so many resources and communities available to young people. Join that. You'll find your people inside of that, be exposed to what's going on in the world. I also would say, like, for those young people interested in like entrepreneurship or understanding how building companies and how understand the value of what companies create in the world, in America, you guys have Robinhood. In Canada, we have Wealthsimple. Put $5 into an investment account and then pick your favorite biotech stocks. And just having skin in the game will teach you markets, will teach you about what those companies are doing, what they're focused on. I can promise you, just having $5 in it, you'll see it go down, you'll see it go up, but at least you get exposed to what companies are doing for this world. That got me very excited about investing or about companies, and I would implore any young person to try to do that. Not a lot of money, just skin in the game will teach you a lot, I would say.
Yeah, $5 is a whole lot of money, you know.
I said $5, right?
Yeah, 5.
Oh, okay, yeah.
Thank you all so much. We've just got one more question from the chat. So Juliet Irene Marie Love Silva says, what about emailing someone to ask for internship opportunities in industry? I wonder how likely this is, especially for someone that's not living in the country. Thank you. Where the company is located. So international opportunities.
I think so. Interestingly, my company, half of my company is in the US, half of it is in Toulouse, France. So we do get different people asking for different internships in different spots. And so it is also a probability. It's something you can try. The likelihood of it going through goes up if you're more connected to the person you're emailing. So the whole thing about the alum network, if you contact an alum, you and that person went to the same school together. So then they can vouch for your, whatever level of education you've gotten, and then they can put your name in the hat. And that's why I utilize my Vassar and my UB alum network a lot. I'm an antisocial extrovert, but I will jump if I need something. Yes, it's a thing. Kendrick Lamar said it. So, so I think asking for internships is great. It's a great way to expose yourself to the nuances of, all these careers that are possible with a PhD or master's in a science degree. I mean, in a science field. So yeah, I think you should try it. But as I said, you will increase your likelihood if you contact somebody you have something in common with, because they can vouch for you, because their name is going to be attached to you. So they have to ensure that you're not going to make them look bad, because in our world, reputation is everything. It's why people check out Retraction Watch every day. So yeah, ask for an internship, but definitely start using a network somewhere that you can find commonality with, and then move on from there. So that's what I would say.
Anyone else like to add to that?
No, I would just say I would very much agree with what the Chum is saying.
Yeah.
Oh, look, my new mentor agrees with me. It's great.
Step one.
This is how you do it.
This is how you do it.
All right, fantastic. Well, I'd like to thank all of you, the panelists, for the #Careers in Immuno session today. And thank you, attendees, for the wonderful questions, and to the Black Immuno team. Have a great afternoon, and we all hope you learned something. So thank you.
Thank you, everybody.
Take care.
Thank you.